From Washington, D.C., this is Balance of Power with Joe Mathieu.
The president says, no, we are not about to attack Venezuela. Welcome to the Friday edition as the president responds to a report that strikes on Venezuela are imminent. We're going to get the latest ahead from Bloomberg's Laura Davison, and we'll discuss this along with more when we sit down with retired General Wesley Clark just moments from now. It's day 31 of the government shutdown, as we'll discuss with Democratic Congresswoman Rebecca Balint of Vermont and with our political panel. It's all after a look at Wall Street. Let's get up to date on the Friday trade with Charlie Pellet at World Headquarters in New York. Hey, Charlie.
Well, hello there, Joe Mathieu. Lows of the day right now on the Dow Jones Industrial Average, S&P 500 Index holding on to a gain barely. We got NASDAQ pushing higher, up by 96 points right now, up by about 0.4%. Wall Street's blistering bull market getting fresh fuel at the end of a month that has lived up to its volatile reputation. Just under 3 hours to go until we wrap up the trading month of October. So here's where we stand. The Dow now down by 100 points, underscoring low of the day, down 0.2%. Little changed on the S&P, up 2 points right now. NASDAQ up 92. For NASDAQ, a gain of 0.4%. Russell 2000 index of small cap shares dipping into the red, down 0.2%. But our Mag 7 index holding on to gains of 1%. This after earnings from both Apple and Amazon. 10-year 4.09% with a 2-year currently yielding 3.60%. Gold is off 1%, $39.83 the ounce. West Texas Intermediate crude, $60.80 a barrel right now. It is up by about 0.4%. Bitcoin higher by 1% now, $108,590 on a Bitcoin. Amazon surging after earnings. Amazon up now by 10.3%. It did post robust cloud growth. And Apple shares higher, little changed, up under 0.1%. Apple is projecting a jump in sales over the holiday season. Recapping, S&P little changed, up 5 right now, up under 0.1%. And for on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now wherever you get your podcasts. Back, we go to Washington. Once again, your host, here he is, Joe Mathieu.
All right, Charlie, great to see you. Charlie will have more in about 20 minutes as we keep tabs on Wall Street. Has not turned out to be the best session here, but there have been a lot of factors at play this week in the throes of earnings reporting season, so we try not to read too far into what's happening. Coming up, we're going to spend some time with retired U.S. Army General Wesley Clark as the president makes news on Venezuela. Also making news on the shutdown on this day 31. Happy Halloween, everybody. I have no news on when we're going to reopen, although the president seems to think that he has the thought of going nuclear, the nuclear option in the Senate, and the filibuster. That was his post on Truth Social that we'll talk about in a moment here. But of course, lawmakers are gone, most of them. The Senate is now out for the weekend. Everybody's getting ready to go pass out candy. And tomorrow's a big day, November 1st. SNAP benefits begin to expire. Open enrollment begins for those seeking health care with subsidies not yet addressed. And Head Start also starts to go broke tomorrow. We also have elections ahead next Tuesday. So there are some thoughts that as talks begin behind the scenes in Washington, maybe something's about to shake loose. But the talking points haven't changed. Listen to House Speaker Mike Johnson from earlier today.
The same Democrats who've been perfectly fine with defunding SNAP and WIC for over a month now are suddenly claiming to be outraged that Republicans and President Trump can't just wave some magic wand and fix the mess that they themselves have created. If they're suddenly waking up to the pain their reckless decision is causing, then there's one simple way to fix it. They can come back in here and vote to reopen the government.
Of course, they're not back in here. As I mentioned, everybody's away for the weekend. And while the House has been out of session for more than 45 days, Laura Davison covering all of this here in our Bloomberg Washington Bureau, our deputy Washington Bureau chief with us now at the desk. The president says go nuclear, end the filibuster. This thing would be done in just moments. What's the majority leader think of that?
He does not like this idea one bit. He, for months has been saying he doesn't like it. He came out, his spokesman came out, and after Trump made this post yesterday, saying he wanted Republicans to do that, said, nope, this is not on the table. This is not happening. And Thune rightly recognizes that, the Republicans are not going to be in control of Washington forever, and they don't want Democrats to have the ability to just enact sweeping changes when they're in power, whether that be 2, 4, 6, 8 years from now.
Well, short of that, we have no off-ramp at the moment. There has been chatter, as you've been reporting, Laura, that there are some rank and file talks underway, although we've heard that before. I am compelled, though, by this headline that Chuck Schumer met yesterday with Senator Katie Britt. Does that give us a sense that the gears are starting to turn?
It could. Katie Britt's state of Alabama is a state that relies heavily on STAT benefits. Yeah. We were doing an analysis of all of the districts, and there are lots of Trump districts that, are very reliant on this food aid. So that could start to see Republicans seeing pressure from folks at home. You have Head Starts closing. You also have, military federal workers who are going without pay. The thing I think we really need to watch that's going to be the pressure point, though, are airports. And we've seen some sporadic closures, ground stoppages, including at DCA yesterday, where Thune was stranded at the Capitol, couldn't get back to South Dakota. But they've sort of been temporary. We haven't seen system-wide outages that will really be the thing that could tip this into negotiating mode.
Do we hear any chatter about a walkout? I mean, obviously, the air traffic controllers are not being paid, and they're all working overtime just by the nature of their jobs. When does the union say it's sick out day?
That's, what our team here is very closely trying to figure out. They have not indicated that. Even, last shutdown back in 2018, 2019, we had a day where you had Miami, Philadelphia, LaGuardia, and Newark that were basically all had ground stoppages and just totally messed up all air travel across the eastern seaboard. And that, later that night is when the shutdown ended. And that wasn't even a coordinated thing. That was just enough people saying on day 35 of the shutdown, it doesn't make sense for me to go into work. I've got other priorities. I need to be driving for DoorDash or Uber or whatever to pay the bills.
What a thought. Day 35, by the way, is Tuesday, so we'd set a new record next Wednesday for the all-time. There's new polling out, Laura, pretty incredible, and it's what I guess Chuck Schumer was probably hoping for. ABC News, Washington Post poll finds Americans blame Republicans over congressional Democrats. There you see it on your screen. 45 to 33%. Independents blame Republicans by a 2-to-1 margin. Do numbers like these start to pull a meeting together at the White House?
It could. And this is also why you see Democrats saying that they're not going to fold. They want to stay in this fight. They've had sort of the edge in polling the entire time. This polling is better than some that were even, a couple weeks ago. So it seems that they've been able to keep public opinion on their side during this. Republicans, they also think that they have the edge. This poll doesn't necessarily indicate that. But they're both kind of waiting to see where the chips fall. Problems with the shutdown compound the longer it goes. So Republicans are betting that people are going to get fed up and blame the Democrats. Democrats are betting that people are going to see their premiums increase and say, what the heck, we need to get this solved. Wow,
boy, it's going to feel different when we start the new week here on Monday, and these benefits have actually begun to expire and real people are telling stories. We'll just have to see how that goes, and of course what the reaction will be on Election Day. Laura, I want to ask you about the president, though. His comments on Venezuela was on Air Force One. He's on his way to Florida right now. They actually stopped the jet on the tarmac so he could go back and talk to reporters. When asked about imminent strikes against Venezuela, as the Miami Herald reported, he said no.
He said no, he's not thinking. He said no, he's made no decision, and no, that no attacks are imminent. This, there have been two reports, but one from the Wall Street Journal that said this was under discussion, and another one from the Miami Herald that was much more definitive, saying that this, could be coming within days or hours. Poured a lot of cold water on that. I think that is, kind of lessen the flames and the sort of. Discord around that topic. But this has been, Trump himself a week ago said that land strikes would be next. So I think the question is still here, not necessarily, if, but when. But clearly he's not ready to come out and say he's made that decision yet.
That's fascinating stuff. This is what we're going to be getting into coming up next with retired General Wesley Clark. Laura, thank you as always. Happy Halloween, I'm supposed to say as well. It is October 31st. Big Halloween bash, I hope, for you. Laura Davison, our Deputy Bureau Chief, we thank you. I'm Joe Mathieu in Washington, and thank you for being with us here on the Halloween edition of Balance of Power. The president has said a lot about Venezuela. These reports shouldn't be a surprise to anyone, knowing as well that a carrier strike group is on its way right now, the USS Jerry Ford, soon to arrive in the Caribbean. Here's the latest from President Trump on this.
Our sea drugs, as they call them, they use the term sea drugs, the drugs coming in by sea, are like 5% of what they were a year ago, less than 5%. So now they're coming in by land, and even the land is concerned because I told them that's going to be next. The land is going to be next. And we may go to the Senate, we may go to the, Congress and tell them about it. But I can't imagine they'd have any problem with it. I think, in fact, while we're here, I think it's a good idea.
It's a good idea. All right. The land is next, he said. That was October 23rd, his most complete remarks on this to date, until, again, he said no to the reporters asking him this morning. So this may not be done. It may just really be a question about timing, to Laura's point, and that's what we want to talk about with the general. Wesley Clark is with us, retired four-star general, U.S. Army, served as commander of U.S. Southern Command, so he knows this region rather well, founder of Wesley K. Clark and Associates. General, it's great to see you. I wonder how you're interpreting the remarks by the president, knowing the flotilla, the armada that we have assembled that's about to get even bigger in the Caribbean. How do you read his remarks, and what do you think's about to happen in Venezuela?
I think it's like jiggling the skeleton key in the lock. It doesn't always engage the first time you move it back and forth and play with it a little bit. So you've got military force. The rumors are that there are some special operators inside Venezuela. You're not quite sure what the target is. That's Maduro's problem. Is it him? Could he just suddenly disavow Russia, Iran, and China and say, no, I don't want them. I'm on your side, America? Could he suddenly say, I'm going to crack down on all? Could he say, I'm just going to accept the results of the next election, and I mean it this time? He doesn't know what the objective is, so he's under a lot of pressure. And I think this is part of the strategy. We don't know what the objective really is of the administration, but if it really is about drugs, then yes, most of it is coming through Mexico by land. And if you're going to do something with drugs, you have to look at the demand side as well. So we're just in the early stages of this yet. This is a pressure building up on Maduro.
It is something. You mentioned the demand side. We never talk about that as if these drugs are, being pushed on Americans. They're coming here because Americans are demanding them, which is its own problem. The USS Gerald Ford is on its way right now, General. It's apparently not in theater yet. Would the administration take action without that platform being there?
Well, it depends on what the objective is of the administration. If the objective was to go in and snatch Maduro and put him on trial somewhere, then maybe you don't need the Ford there. If the objective is to sort of intimidate, be prepared, then you want overwhelming force. And that's what we're assembling there. They do have aircraft. Anti-aircraft, they have radars, they have ships, but that could all be taken out in a few hours, I think. What you couldn't do, even with the two amphibious groups that are there from the Marines and so forth, what you can't do is really go in and occupy Venezuela. It's just too big, too many people, too many weapons distributed. You can't quite do the same kind of takedown that we did in Panama against Manuel Noriega in 1989. That was an entirely different case, legally, militarily, geopolitically. So this is different. We still don't really know what the objective is of the administration, and it could be that really it is drugs. It also could be that's just what you say when there's a private set of objectives that are coordinated through Congress. And he has briefed at least the Republican members of Congress in the big committees. I hope he'll bring the Democrats in too, because national security shouldn't be partisan. It should be beyond the country's borders. We should all be one nation.
Well, this is a great point that you make, and maybe that will actually tell us a bit if we start seeing briefings across the aisle on Capitol Hill. I know that the Pentagon has not been terribly fond of talking to Congress at all lately. But, General, we've seen B-1 bombers and B-52 bombers buzzing Venezuela's airspace. We also saw Venezuelan F-16s buzz a couple of U.S. ships weeks ago when we first started striking these alleged drug boats coming out of Venezuela. You mentioned the fact that they do have some aircraft. They've got anti-aircraft missiles and the like. What kind of a job would it be for us to knock all of that out, or would there in fact be an air war over Venezuela?
You never want to discount an adversary. So, yes, they've got pilots. They fly F-16s. They have some air-to-air weapons, but they don't have the modern air-to-air weapons. And they don't have the system that we have. So there might be an air war over Venezuela. They might get some aircraft actually off the ground. But in terms of our ability to reach out and strike, our ability to use stealth, our ability to name the time and manner of attack and so forth. I don't think there's any question about the outcome. And the Israelis have really pioneered this. In their operations, they typically strike. They're effective. They're using our technology. Of course, we know all those systems. I wouldn't think there'd be much of a problem. But for the pilot in the aircraft, hey, he's put his life on the line for the country. He's got to succeed, and we would do everything possible to make sure we can do this effectively without losses.
Yep. As we're speaking, General, we're showing images, video of some of the alleged drug boats that we've blown up recently. Too many to count at this point. There was a sub. We've got the boats as well. This is quite a gallery that we have of these things blowing up and catching on fire. A lot of people have died. As someone who actually ran Southern Command, what is your thought on the legality of this operation so far?
Well, it should have been briefed as legal. Presumably, there's some legal authorization to it. We haven't been told that. The evidence that has been presented to Congress, at least as it's been explained publicly, doesn't fully justify that we know for sure that these are drug boats. And if they are, then it would be a violation really of maritime norms to attack them. We would normally seize and secure them, use them to collect information, and then run it back to the source. This is a different approach. It's more about sort of naked power than it is the international rules-based system. And this is one of the concerns that so many have today when you look at the shape of the international environment, what's going on in Ukraine, what's happening or might happen in Taiwan and so forth. How do we use all the tools of statecraft, not just the military and not just tariffs, but international law, diplomacy, and how do we put it all together in a package that best serves the interests of the American people? And so when you look at what's happening with these boats, you have to ask, what if Russia decides to do this? What if China decides that it makes up with anything in the South China Sea that's moving must be a threat to China and starts knocking off boats? Certainly wouldn't like it. So I think we have to be very careful about the example we set. I hope that the administration will come forward soon with more of a legal justification and make sure that this is not a partisan but a bipartisan thing. It's got the support of the entire Congress. That's the way that American foreign policy is strongest.
Yeah. General, I only have a minute left, and I hate to bring up a whole new topic. I don't want to have to cut you off. But this headline just ran from CNN. The Department of Defense has okayed Tomahawk missiles for Ukraine, and it will leave the decision finally to President Trump. In our remaining 30 seconds, should those missiles go to Ukraine?
Absolutely right. Yep, puts more pressure on Putin, brings us closer to an end of the war. Yes, absolutely. Great decision.
Fascinating. We'd love to talk to you more about that when we learn more, General. It's good to see you. Retired General Wesley Clark with us live again on Bloomberg TV and radio. We thank you, as always, for the insights. Tomahawks for Ukraine cleared by the Pentagon. We'll see what the president has to say about this. Maybe he'll be asked about it if he talks to reporters when he lands in Florida. He's on his way there right now for a weekend at Mar-a-Lago. The Halloween edition of Balance of Power continues next with our panel, Rick Davis and Arshi Siddiqui, together as we look ahead to Election Day next week. The impact of the government shutdown should not be discounted, and we'll get their take next on Bloomberg. The numbers in California are eye-popping as we follow the money here on Prop 50. You know, next Tuesday is an election day, and we've talked a lot on this program about the gubernatorial races, certainly in Virginia and New Jersey. We've talked a lot about the New York City mayoral race, and we're going to get into all three of these. But also, what's taking place in California is extremely important. Prop 50, this is redistricting, right? We talked about it a lot when this first emerged, and it has started a cascade now of other states rewriting their congressional maps following what is expected to take place in California. Gavin Newsom put this up for a vote. That was the way they decided to handle it. And Prop 50 looks like it's going to pass quite easily. Over the past 11 weeks, Bloomberg News reporting Newsom and his allies brought in more than $120 million for Prop 50, about 3 times the total raised by the proposal's opponents. Yes, George Soros' name is on there, along with others, including Reed Hastings. And this is where we start now with our political panel. Bloomberg Politics contributor Rick Davis is with us, our Republican strategist and partner at Stonecourt Capital. Arshi Siddiqui with me here in Washington as well, former aide to House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, founder CEO of Bellwether Government Affairs. It's great to have you both with us. Arshi, I'd love to start with you on Prop 50. Are you expecting a blowout, and what would this mean for the redistricting efforts around the country and just the aura for Democrats that might follow nationally?
Well, I think there are two important pieces about California. One is it's a defensive measure, and I think the governor really went out of his way to structure it in a way that really was not a unilateral decision by him, but actually going back to the voters. So, and then it was a really quick ramp-up time. So it's a defensive measure for Democrats in a very aggressive push by Republicans to go state by state and try to rewrite these districts. What
do you make of the money involved here, Rick? You've run enough campaigns and elections to have a sense of this. You expect a blowout?
Well, it certainly is what's indicated in the polling. I mean, recent polling, as you pointed out, Joe, 6 in 10 Californians are supporting Prop 50. Hundreds out of 160 million being spent, 125 of that is pro Prop 50. So it's overwhelming force politically. And so we'll see. Early voting is very favorable to the Prop 50 demographics, but early indications are that there'll be a significant Republican advantage on Election Day, which is pretty traditional in an early voting state.
Indeed, Rick makes reference to the poll out in the last 24 hours from the Institute of Governmental Studies at the University of California, Berkeley. 60%, Arshi, of likely voters backed the proposal, compared with 48% of registered voters who were surveyed in August. So there's been some real momentum here. Really interesting. Will Democrats regret this move? Knowing that, of course, this started in Texas by Republicans, but it's tipped off a cascade of states that really could end up favoring Republicans in the end.
No, I actually, not at all. I think if anything, it is a defensive move that really Democrats were backed into a corner.
You saw no choice on this.
Yeah, there's no choice. And honestly, that's just unilateral disarmament where, it's not a fair fight going into the midterms. So I think even now with this California move, that still doesn't get Democrats where they need to be.
Sure.
Because you saw this in Indiana. In Indiana, the Republicans are very skittish, and it's just been this barrage of pressure by Washington, Republicans in Washington and the administration on getting that piece done.
Really interesting. As we gather here on day 31 of the government shutdown, there are implications, according to some at least, that will play out here in these elections. Again, we've got governor's races in Virginia, New Jersey. We've got New York, might kind of be its own thing with the Mamdani factor. But let's keep these two gubernatorial races in mind. Rick Davis, people start losing SNAP benefits tomorrow. Open enrollment's going to be in everybody's face when it comes to Obamacare. We've got Head Start on ice all of a sudden because of the shutdown. People are going to be talking about ground stops, most likely at airports. How does that play in favor potentially of Democrats or Republicans in these two races?
Look, I mean, the polls that we've been talking about around the government shutdown penalize Republicans, especially with independent voters who tend to be the deciding vote in a lot of races. And certainly will be in this very close New Jersey governor's race that is within the margin of error, and turnout will be a major contributing factor to the outcome of this race. In other words, who shows up in the early voting and on Election Day? Is it going to be Democrats who are motivated because of the anger they have toward the government shutdown? Is it Republicans who are supportive of the Donald Trump agenda? And so I think that's the one to watch of all of these. The outcomes are pretty much assured, except for New Jersey. And if Democrats win, Republicans are going to say, "Wow, if without a government shutdown, could we have taken that race?" And I think that's not an academic issue. That could be pretend serious considerations for how to handle then the midterm elections.
Yeah. If the polls like today's from ABC News, Washington Post show Americans blame Republicans, does that favor Democrats on Tuesday?
I think the government shutdown nexus in New Jersey is interesting because if you look at, it is a margin of error race, as Rick pointed out, but also importantly, there's been a lot of campaigning in communities of color, and some of these benefits are really disproportionately cuts are impacting communities of color. So I think from that perspective, there's a nexus. But I do think turnout is going to be critical in New Jersey, and it is a very tight race. And as you know, for the past 60 years, voters in New Jersey, they alternate between a Democrat or a Republican in the governor's office.
Right. So how worried are you about New Jersey as a Democrat?
I think what's very exciting is Mikey Sherrill is just the whole package. She's smart, she's driven, she has a national security background, she's a moderate pragmatist, a problem solver. So I think that's a lot of room for hope there.
Well, it's being looked at as a bellwether. Rick Davis, how important will the results in New Jersey specifically be for these two parties?
Yeah, look, I think that if Republicans can win this, and we, as Arshi pointed out, we haven't been that successful in most recent statewide election history. They're gonna rally around the president's agenda in a way that right now you don't see happening in the other races, and so it will give an impetus to Republicans to double down on this strategy. It'll make it more difficult to cut a deal to open government, assuming we're not open by, the 4th of November. And so it could really change the mental attitude that Republicans have about, whether they're leaning back or leaning into this agenda going into the midterms.
Really interesting. We haven't talked enough about Virginia, probably because a lot of folks see this as a foregone conclusion. By the way, we should note that Virginia's General Assembly advanced a proposed constitutional amendment today that could bring redistricting to the Old Dominion. Arshi, is this a blowout, as many are casting in the media? I live in Virginia, although I'm in Northern Virginia, so I'm not seeing a lot of winsome signs around. How do you expect this to pan out?
I think no one should take Virginia for granted. And we've seen that. And you look at Youngkin's win last time, and we've seen some indications that Trump is really focused on Virginia because of redistricting.
Right.
So he's engaging. And so in that, as we know, he can be a very powerful advocate on the campaign trail. So in this final stage, I think Democrats aren't taking anything for granted, and they cannot afford to. Now, the great thing is Abigail Spanberger is a fighter. The Congresswoman knows how to really run a really aggressive and strong campaign, and she's really focused on issues of affordability and delivering for Virginia families.
Well, as my fellow Virginian Rick Davis would tell you, we can't get through a single commercial break without seeing ads in this campaign. It's just been dominating the airwaves and dominating the conversation. Rick, to what extent could the shutdown impact results in Virginia as well, knowing how many federal workers live here?
Yeah, we've been looking at turnout in Fairfax County, a competitive county that has been trending more blue than red in the last few cycles. And the turnout as of today is on the same par level as a presidential election. And remember, this isn't even a midterm. This is an off-year election, which means turnout usually is off. And so the fact that you've got that level of activity at the ballot box before Election Day it usually indicates that you've got a change election coming, which would, of course, advantage the Democrats in this case. But I got to believe that you have that kind of a strong move in Fairfax County. It is a direct corresponding factor to the shutdown. And of course, we see all that news, and we have hundreds of thousands of people who've been affected. And so you got to believe that's translating into some political activity.
Really interesting. This is going to be a fascinating night, actually. I'm really looking forward to it. In our coverage here on Bloomberg, we'll have special coverage for you on Tuesday, live from World Headquarters in New York. Everyone's expecting Mayor Mamdani to show up at some point, maybe later in the evening on Tuesday. What do you make of the Republican effort to elect Andrew Cuomo, a Democrat turned independent?
Yeah, I think the fear factor, there's certainly a excitement factor on the Democratic side for Mamdani. I think on the Republican side, there's a fear factor, and there has been a fear factor, and then also an attempt. It's interesting. We're talking about Spanberger, Mikey Sherrill. Nobody talks about them as our standard bearers and great examples of Democrats. People are also looking at Mamdani to really kind of characterize him as a radical, whereas we have these other two potential governors who are really middle of the road pragmatists.
Fascinating. Rick, we've only got about 30 seconds. Does Wall Street vote Cuomo?
Wall Street votes Cuomo, absolutely. Everybody I've talked to over the last few months prepping for this election on Tuesday are sick with concerns about what that agenda that Mondami is going to result in for New York City. And so we'll see. But I think fear and loathing is the nature of the election in New York City.
Fear and loathing in Manhattan. Rick Davis, Arshi Siddiqui, many thanks to both of you for a great conversation. Again, we'll have special election night coverage here on Bloomberg. Much more to follow as we zero in on the government shutdown straight ahead. It's day 31. Stay with us on Bloomberg. Indeed, I'm Joe Mathieu in Washington. Thank you for being with us here on the Friday edition of Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio. I'm imagining the foliage right now in Stowe, Vermont, which I'm sure is striking compared to what we have here in the Washington, D.C. area. But it's not foliage that we're going to be talking about with Congresswoman Rebecca Balint. Now, on day 31 of a government shutdown, that means we're one day away from SNAP benefits expiring and open enrollment for Obamacare beginning, not to mention the end of money for Head Start. There's great concern about what's going to happen to tens of millions of people who rely on this assistance. And as the Congresswoman will tell us here in a moment, they're actually taking action in the state of Vermont, backfilling SNAP benefits on the state level, which is a very important trend that we're seeing take place. Vermont was one of the first states to do this, and it's coinciding, again, with attorneys general from about 24 states suing to reinstate SNAP benefits or use money from a contingency fund. Vermont is not waiting. They're taking care of this on the state level, at least for now. Congresswoman Balint is a Democrat and represents Vermont's at-large district. It's great to have you back, Congresswoman. I hope things are well in the great state of Vermont. How long can you keep backfilling SNAP while the government's closed?
Yeah, not long. I mean, this is the struggle right now because we are facing the double whammy of the impact from the so-called big, beautiful bill that was passed earlier this year, and the steep cuts to Medicaid have also impacted our ability to keep our healthcare system afloat. We're really struggling in that realm. And of course, as you said, people are going to go hungry this weekend. And there are a couple things that I just wanted to point out is that in the past, whenever there has been a government shutdown, there have been contingency funds used to make sure that people did not lose a SNAP payment. Again, that's just, modest food assistance for people. It's the first time in which you have had an administration saying we will not be using contingency funds to make those payments. This is a choice. It doesn't have to be this way. That the SNAP money is not it's not contingent upon us coming to a deal to reopen the government. And that's what I want to make sure people understand. There is money that can be used right now, and which is why so many of the states the states' AGs decided to sue. The other piece that is troubling, and that's why you asked how long will Vermont be able to do that, the administration has also said they will not be reimbursing states for feeding people. And it is deeply disturbing to me that even as recently as the end of September, the Trump administration had, by its own admission, had put notices on their web pages related to USDA saying that the funds were there and available and would be used. And now that's all been scrubbed and replaced with highly partisan information. It doesn't have to be this way. It doesn't.
For a little perspective on Vermont, roughly 1 in 10 people rely on federal food assistance in your state. And based on the reporting that I saw, that's about 38,000 people who low-income households in Vermont, 38,000 households, to be clear, not people, continuing to receive support here from SNAP. You guys call it 3 Squares Vermont, the program. And so you've got this covered for 15 days. You know what Republicans would say? You know what the president would say if he was sitting here, if Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House of Representatives, would say then Democrats should vote to reopen the government and this wouldn't be a problem. How do you respond?
I know they would say that. And what's misleading there are two things that are misleading about that. One, the money is already there. All the president has to do is instruct the contingency funds to be released, and people would not be going hungry this weekend. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, even if the House had been in D.C. this week, which the Democrats were there. Again, Democrats were there ready to work with Republicans. Republicans weren't there. It's not as if the spigot just gets turned on automatically. And so the most immediate way to get food to people is to use these contingency funds. And I just think it's a very sad state of affairs when you have the Speaker of the House using hungry people as a political football. Because again, this is unusual. This doesn't usually happen during a shutdown. You don't usually have an administration saying we're not going to feed people. You also don't have an administration, a president traveling overseas during a government shutdown. Usually you have the president and the Speaker of the House trying to convene people to get to an agreement. The other thing that I want people to understand is that the so-called continuing resolution that they put out is only good for another 15 days.
Well, so, yes, right.
I mean, there's so much that has gone wrong here because Republicans were not willing to meet with us before the 11th hour. And then by that point, it was an unwillingness to have any kind of negotiation. So it makes me very angry.
Been asking about that date a lot. I mean, even if we voted today, government reopens, we'd be heading for potentially another shutdown before Thanksgiving. So obviously some of this may need to be rewritten. There's a federal judge who's considering this lawsuit coming from state attorneys general, as we discussed, and indicated, this is Judge Indira Talwani, indicated that she likely will order the Trump administration to use these reserves to at least partially fund SNAP. The quote, Congress has put money in an emergency fund, and it is hard for me to understand how this is not an emergency, unquote. Congresswoman, is that how this ends?
I hope so. In terms of this particular issue, I certainly hope that will be the ruling from the federal judge. What's complicated, and I don't know if you're aware of this, but I want to just highlight it because it's a complicating factor here, that the people who would be positively impacted would be the people in the states who were a party to that lawsuit. So I can't remember if it's 25 or 27 states AGs that sued, but the states who were not party to the lawsuit would not automatically be receiving those funds.
Wow, interesting.
Yes.
We got a lot to figure out here. If you're called back and the president wants to start talking, say, after election night, are you ready to have that conversation?
Look, we've been there. I have been going back and forth between Vermont and D.C. ever since Mike Johnson decided to put the House into recess. We can't come to any kind of agreement back in our district. So I've been traveling there regularly. Everyone in the Democratic caucus has been there ready to do the work. And meanwhile, trying to meet the needs back in the district. I just, I want people to understand that, of course, there is always, when you're in D.C., there's partisan one-upmanship happening. But I want people to understand that we have never had a situation in which a party, and in this case, it's the Republicans who control the House, the Senate, and the White House, are not willing to do any kind of negotiation and also left town. Like, at least the Senate is there trying to do work. The House Republicans have not been in D.C. for, what are we at? 30 consecutive days now.
Something days. Yeah. No, I mean, the House has been out of session for over 40 days, though, right?
Yeah.
Congresswoman, thank you.
Right.
Let's continue this conversation when you're back in Washington. Becca, Balint, Democrat, Vermont. Hope you have a good Halloween. Mike McGlone gives out the full-size candy bars, is what I've been hearing, if you know where he lives in Miami. Bloomberg Intelligence senior commodity strategist is with us right now as we watch the price of oil actually move a little higher today. This is kind of interesting. Mike McGlone, it's great to see you as always. WTI, West Texas Intermediate crude was above $61 a barrel a little while ago. What's at play?
It's stuck at 60, Joe. The significance of 60 is that's right about where it ended in 2019, right before the pandemic. And it's a known. There's an oversupply, bear market. It's a question of what trips it up. The key question I ask myself is, with crude oil down about 15% this year, that's juxtaposed to about the S&P 500 up 17%. It's a significant sign of divergent weakness. So I look at it. What happens if the S&P 500 corrects 10% or so? Crude oil, I still think, is on that trajectory to $40 a barrel. And I don't know what's going to stop it, but I know it can accelerate it. Just a little backup in the stock market.
Interesting. I thought maybe you'd say something about Venezuela. I don't know. Your thoughts on this? There was reporting earlier, the president knocked down those reports that we were set to attack Venezuela imminently. Would that be a factor in the oil market?
In the short term, Venezuela is known to have some of the largest oil deposits on the planet, and they're just not properly being utilized. They only export about 500,000 barrels a day. To put that in context, total crude and liquid fuel exports from the U.S., that's an oxymoron compared to the past, from the U.S., are running around 4 million barrels a day. So they don't have a lot to do. So in the short term, it might matter, but if that happens and there's some kind of regime change in Venezuela, that brings on supply. So it's not a big deal in terms of the market, but the key thing that's happening, Joe, is that shift from the focus on supply is shifted to the Americas from Middle East. That's what's happening on a global basis. That's what's changed in the world. Every single time in the past that crude oil's dropped near 40, which has been 30 times in the last 20 years, the U.S. was a net exporter. Now we're net importer. Now we're an exporter.
Fascinating. It's been how many times in the last 20 years? Did you say 4 times, 3 times?
So 2008 was the first, 2016, and then 2020 when it went negative. Right around 2020, we were kind of even, but now our exports exceed our imports in total crude oil and liquid fuels.
The two majors were out today. We got quarterly results from Exxon and Chevron. They're squeezing a lot out of a barrel, it seems here. What did you make of their results?
That's a key thing to remember about humans and harnessing energy is you can make decent money in the energy patch, producing energy and producing crude oil. So like you look at the XLE, that spider ETF, it's up about 70% since 2019. And crude oil is the same. Wow. So that's generally a good place to invest in energy is in the equities.
Yeah. You're giving out the full-size candy bars like Donald Trump, I heard tonight. Mike, you excited for Halloween?
Well, here's a candy bar for you. When I was in Connecticut, Weston, we used to have the most trick-or-treated house in Weston, Connecticut. You can relate to that being from Connecticut. Right? But here's my treat for you. I think we're on pace for the average gasoline price in this country around $3 a gallon to go to $2. And even natural gas to potentially go there, partly because that's where they go all the time. And there's one key thing that might trigger that. That's the stock market just dropping maybe 10%.
What's that mean for heating oil in Connecticut this winter?
Exactly. Well, this winter, that's a key thing. Here's the matters. We had a very cold winter last year. It was great for pond hockey. I was in Miami, so I missed it. If we have a colder than normal winter, it might happen. But if we have a normal winter, prices get pressured.
Fascinating. Great to see you. Mike McGlone, thank you. Bloomberg Intelligence, important breaker on the terminal. The judge in Boston says the administration must use the contingency funds. Food aid suspension likely unlawful. We'll have more on this in the late edition of Balance of Power. I'll meet you at 5 p.m. Eastern, only here on Bloomberg.